and the unhealthy fascination, not with the work, but with sort of the lives of people and, you know, their lifestyle, and that I got no real patience for, and I don't, you know, I don't think that having a public life through the work you do means that, like, you're required to, like, gracefully endure or happily endure, like, you know, people hassling you as an individual in your private time, or waiting for you in airports, and you know, like people who walk around with 5x7 white cards. They're not fans. They're pros. You know, they're pros, and they traffic in a business, and I got no patience or respect for that, really.
Another thing that I would imagine, and again, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it would seem to me, if I was in your position, it would be frustrating, is to look at an industry in which great movies like American History X or Fight Club are considered, they struggle at the box office, and yet sequel number 4 to some crappy franchise, you know, can come in and have a huge first weekend, and that's considered a success. How do you go forward in a business where it's not necessarily about the quality of the work, it's about so many other things?
Well, I think you have to decide, though, what your ambitions are and what you're relating, what your own definitions of success are. I mean, I don't, you know, I would, a lot of what really burned itself into my brain and in many people's brains in films were not like the most successful films. You know, you would never sit where we're sitting now and say, you know, what a shame that De Niro was only in Taxi Driver and Raging Bull and The King of Comedy, you know, none of which were in any way commercially successful at all. You know, we look at those types of films and we say, like, those are the films that have endured, that really matter. Whatever they did in the moment, you know, Taxi Driver certainly wasn't Jaws, and yet it has taken its place, formed its own relationship with audiences over time, and in some ways, to me, that's something I value more. Like, when I got into films, my goal wasn't really, like, you know, to make the biggest box office movies in the world. Like, I used to think to myself, it'd be so great if you ever made anything that formed that kind of relationship with people. So then, of course, you get into the business, and you know that these things are tied to your opportunities, and so you can't help getting spun a little by the value system of the business end of it. And sometimes you sort of go, ooh, like when it doesn't happen. But what's even better is that, like, something like American History X, which was, you know, it wasn't a failure because we made it for so cheap. I mean, we made it guerrilla for like really fast and really cheap. So it wasn't under an enormous amount of pressure to make, like, tens of millions of dollars at the box office. But, like, watching over time, having the experience of watching people form a relationship with that's like really, really gratifying. Fight Club, maybe, you know, just as much or even more so, because that was, like you said, a big studio film that was not considered successful, that was really slammed by a lot of people in the industry, and that over time, you know, objectively came to be a generational zeitgeist kind of a film, and in the long run actually do well commercially because of the volume of DVDs that they sold and things like that. So I think, you know, as you get older and you see the way these things transpire on a longer timeline, it can chill you out about that stuff a lot.
Bring it around to Stone. I just want to ask you. I don't know if it's kind of a multi-part question, but I guess what was the most challenging and also sort of the highlight of challenging part and also the highlight of doing this? As I look at the scenes where you have these long back and forth dialogues across the desk with De Niro, I wonder if that's sort of energizing to do something like that, or if it's a challenge, and also I wanted to make sure to ask you about the out, outer transformation, I guess, that you go through, aside from like the obvious, the cornrows and that stuff. You somehow always seem to inhabit these guys in a very physical, the way that, something about the physicality and the linguistic of it. And just curious what you brought to this one.
Well, I mean, for me, this I would actually say the main thing that pulled me into it. I didn't. The script was originally a play. I wasn't really feeling it at first. The things that got me to really pay attention to it were first John Curran, because I had done the Painted Veil with him, and I thought he was so brilliant. I had such a brilliant experience with him on Painted Veil. I just thought he was like, he was such an interesting combination of things as a filmmaker, like intense and very muscular in his approach, not like ultra sensitive in a way. A very bold, physical, like visual filmmaker, and yet when you got down into the way he cut these scenes of really nuanced emotional stuff, he had such a fine sensitivity for these like nuances of human like denial and repression, and I love the film he made, and I really liked working with him. So I was very, very eager to work with him again. Like I thought he was a really serious filmmaker, and so he was so enthused about it that I kind of kept paying attention to it, because I was like, John, I didn't like it at first, but I was like, if John is this into this, there's got to be something into it. And over time, what he did was really take it and transform it into something else. And over a course of about a year, I became very persuaded that he was on to something more than a thriller. It was very allegorical. It was very much a comment on certain dysfunctional parts of American life, morality, judging other people while not really looking at your own morality and things like that. So,
and you said the consequence of emotional denial. That was very interesting.
Yeah. So the first thing that pulled me in was the chance to work with Curran again, and that was also one of the great joys of it for me. I really, really enjoyed working with him a second time. And then doubly for De Niro, we had gotten to work on one film which had been a total thrill, just the fact of it, but the film itself wasn't, when we talk about the movies we were talking about, like, the movie we made together was great fun. It wasn't like, it wasn't what you dream of when you dream of like mixing it up with De Niro, and this was much more so, like you said. I looked through that thing and I thought, wow, this would be really quite something to sit and just work, go at this level of depth and complexity with him through these almost like a play, like just sitting and doing these scenes with no action and no varnish, and just the two of us. And I thought that was a great thrill, and it was a great thrill to do. It was wonderful to work with him. I think that for me on this one, actually, that I've done other things that were physically extreme or whatever. This one, I didn't necessarily have the intention to do that at first, but I had a hard time getting a bead on the character, like. And the things that ended up helping me were that John set the film in Detroit, and somehow when we got up to Detroit and I started looking at the landscape of Detroit in this really like abandoned urban landscape, and met some people, it was very feral. Like, I can't explain it, but it had a very like edgy, savage feel to it to me. And when we got into the prisons and I started talking to some of these guys, I started focusing on guys who were from like sort of I don't want to say the ghetto, but like the really tough sides of Detroit. And the more I talked to those guys, the more it started to like bloom for me. And I ended up meeting really two guys who between them encompassed almost all aspects of what I tried to turn that character into. The physically, the hair, the voice, the beards, the tattoos, and really even the whole energy. There was these two guys who really, I kind of made a blend of these things that were really striking about them to me, and that's what ended up sort of in some ways saving me, because I felt a little lost with it. I wasn't feeling confident at all about what I was doing until literally almost like a week before we started shooting, and I met these two guys And I brought John in to meet him and kind of went like, don't you think like that's kind of it, right? And he was like, definitely. So then we both got really happy, and that was fun.
Well, I really thought it was terrific.
Thanks.
So thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks. I really appreciate your questions. They're really, really great.
Thank you.
Yeah.